Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Maggie Sarfo to this episode. Maggie, before we get started, if I could ask you to introduce yourself and some of the activities that your company is involved with, and then we'll get stuck into the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here. So Maggie Sarfo, I'm the CEO of Meris Consult Limited, is a business and personal growth advisory and mentoring company. We are also an AI enablement firm, so enabling both growth and AI within businesses, especially in times like these where we are all kind of doing that digital transformation and transitioning into an AI world. Part of that will include doing things like, making sure leaders are ready for AI adoption and how this cascades into the organization with people, into their environment, into clients and things like that. And I'm very delighted to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maggie, there's an awful lot that's been written now about emotional intelligence. And I think by and large, people have accepted, it's not just about IQ, but it's also equally important from a leadership point of view to have and to demonstrate EQ. I just wondered if you could tell our listeners, from your perspective, kind of what's the bridge, what's the connection here between AI and emotional intelligence?
So to set a bit of a context in terms of what we mean by EQ or emotional intelligence, is essentially our ability, our human ability to recognize and regulate our own emotions and that of others, so we can move forward and achieve some of the results that we're looking. And this can be at home and at work, but from our perspective, we talk about the work context. So how do we bridge the gap between AI and EI? Well, if you look at the definition of EI, by default is an innate human ability. Although I know that some may argue that AI may be able to develop emotional intelligence in somewhere down the line. But for now, it's our ability to connect more deeply with who we are and with others, and to be able to read in between the line and to make decisions that are not just for us, not just for our organization, but also for the wider context. Now, if you bring AI into the mix, because AI does not necessarily possess that innate human ability to make some of those decisions, then it's important that as we develop machines that are able to develop and learn and act on their own, that we as humans are also able to develop our emotional intelligence to complement the rate at which artificial intelligence is progressing. So that's where the bridge is, being able to also develop our emotional intelligence and meet AI halfway, so that there is a collaboration between AI and our human emotional intelligence to get the results we're looking for.
So Maggie, thank you for explaining and putting that context in place. But AI, by its very nature, is about using machines, which in some ways kind of excludes human intervention. So where you get the machines and that I want as minimal intervention from people as possible, together with the people themselves. I mean, how does that work? Because I would have thought the AI is trying to kind of exclude people.
So it's, again, I used the word collaboration earlier, but it's all within the workflows that we are establishing within our organizations. And so for every task, every process, yes, we are bringing AI in to make the process more effective and to be able to achieve what we're looking to achieve much faster, and in a lot of cases with minimal risk. Because sometimes, let's face it, humans sometimes are prone to making certain types of mistakes that a machine or AI may not make. So it's in the workflows, I would say, is our ability to then define these workflows within our environments, within our organizations, within our processes in such a way that we know where a human intervention can come in and where we can just leave AI to just deliver. So I give an example, for instance, in the hospitality industry, for instance, where the workflow has been set up in such a way that AI can book let's assume a hotel that's booking through rooms and things like that. So you will also build into that workflow that at some point, if someone is canceling within, 7 days of, them coming in, into accommodation, then, there's a cancellation fee, or in some instances, there's no refund at all. So what happens in those moments where there is more emotionality involved? For instance, someone calls a day before they're about to come in and they say, well, it was all in hand until, a bereavement of a close member of the family happened, right? In that case, do we become more human and have something in the workflow that's able to allow the AI to pass this type of query to a human who'd be able to have a conversation and express that empathy and give an alternative solution to the problem, rather than saying, that's it, the rule is the rule. So those are some of the instances where we can look at how workflows and AI and humans can collaboratively give us the efficiency as well as the customer experience that we're looking to deliver within our environments.
Great. That's a really good example, and I'm sure many people have been caught up in a situation where they have every intention to travel, or whether it's in the hospitality area or even in other areas, but have had to cancel at short notice. If you think about catching a flight, for instance, and then you think, crikey, I can't, I'm kind of stuck. So that's a really, really good example. Thank you. So how can companies, in fact, let me ask the question in a slightly different way. Can companies actually retain emotional intelligence when they're designing and adopting AI?
And they retain it. Of course, they can. It's all within, what's the best way of saying it? Within, the intentions or the strategy that is embedded right at the start of these programs, right? So, and I think in most instances, we are not as conditioned to use our IQ as we are conditioned to use our emotional intelligence. So in a lot of instances, I think emotional intelligence needs to be brought to the fore. What does it mean? In this current world, how do we combine that? And in a lot of cases, I think there is that need to start doing some workshops. So when we're doing workshops that involve AI adoption, it's important that we bring the emotional intelligence adoption, training in that same process, which means that from that perspective, when we are designing the workflows or when we are considering what type of AI tools our organization needs, because it's not just the generative AIs, it's other things, is it going to be agent types? Is it going to be agentic? All those kind of processes. So if the organization says, these are our AI policies and it embeds emotional intelligence as a way of making sure that both the human and the machines are collaborating, because we know that that will give us both the bottom line effects in terms of growth and profitability that we're looking for, as well as the customer experiences and the human equation that can really not be removed from the situation. Then it will mean that we build everything from the ground up with the right kind of strategies, and we don't wait till the end when something has happened before we go, oh, we should have or we could have, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so, I'm just trying to think this through in terms of how a company might go about it. I mean, you talked about putting
Mhm,
workshops in place and doing some training, but
mhm.
how else can companies ensure that they retain a high level of EQ when they're adopting AI?
So you talk about retention. Does that assume that EI is very much, like the awareness of emotional intelligence is very much ingrained in this organization?
Well, I'm thinking, many organizations talk about wanting to create a
Yeah,
culture, an environment which is open and
exactly.
friendly and trusting,
Yeah,
and
and that is a very good part of EI. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So how does the company retain that
Hmm.
while at the same time putting agentic AI in place, which is
Hmm.
actually requires again very little human intervention.
Yeah. So how they retain it is essentially just, again, they could look at the job descriptions, for instance, and look at where AI is involved in a person's job description, and making sure that there is that element of EI is also a big part of this, for instance. I think it can be communicated through conversations, through reviews in terms of performance and things like that. And I think if we're to look at this more seriously, we will know that in most instances, we are more quick to take action without reflecting on the emotional intelligence actions in terms of, where am I whilst I'm making this decision? Am I under duress because something has happened and I have to make a decision? Am I stressed? And of course, when we are stressed, emotional intelligence can quickly go out of the window in the decisions that we're making. And so it's about the awareness creation, and this can be embedded in things like, you know, reviews, those reviews between a leader and their team on a one-to-one basis in the group settings. I think it starts from the top as well. And actually, we talked about this previously, where I was talking about the fact that, a lot of leaders, to step more boldly into this new world of AI, need to really do a lot of unlearning in order to relearn what the new world feels like with AI in the midst so powerfully. So these are some of the things, and we'll see that we'll have to create the AI awareness more at the top. And if we're making the right decisions at the top with a lot of AI influence, then it will naturally also cascade down to the rest of the organization and the
Yeah.
culture. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think you're absolutely right in terms of the impact that AI is going to have on leaders is, I think, something that not there's not a huge amount of discussion about that. And I'd really like your views as to what impact you think AI is going to have on leaders.
So I think a leader's role in the age of AI is going to shift significantly. We're going to come back more into the so-called softer skills, which includes EI. We're going to shift more into awareness. We're going to shift more into empathy. We're going to shift more into being in that space where we dedicate, human resources into complementing most of the automated systems in our environment. And I think for a lot of leaders, that can be a challenge when they have been leading at the forefront with, in a way, very structured approach in terms of, when this happens, this is how I act, and this is how I lead, and this is how I manage people. That is really going to change from that perspective of, we will be required to think on our feet. For instance, if we look at how we will be implementing EI in organizations, you know, we have to look at things like awareness, of the leader as well as the organization as a whole, and how they can manage things like fear, uncertainty, what are they protecting? And quite rightly so, these organizations have been built from the ground up and they have something worth protecting, but then, is the fear and uncertainty preventing them from being more visionary, which is where the world we're moving in is? And if so, then, there is that kind of maybe coaching and mentoring and the same thing that we require a leader to be able to support the team. I think leaders will need that support in terms of seeing where they are in terms of the awareness spectrum, so they can actually adopt and implement AI very effectively within the organization. The other thing I want to talk about is readiness. So once they're fully aware of what it means for them to be leaders in an AI world, they need to move into readiness. And again, this is readiness of the organization in terms of building the AI literacy, upscaling programs, for themselves as leaders as well as for the team, before they can move into other steps. Like step 3 could be about, the pilot testing of the program, then the scaling, before they can actually say they have mastered AI at some level. But actually at the moment, I don't think many organizations are at that mastery level.
I mean, you've touched on something which I don't hear many people talking about, which is the fear and the uncertainty that AI gives rise to, because clearly everybody's worried, and it's in the press. It's when you go to conferences, you hear people talking about it. It's now, which is that AI is going to have a really adverse impact on jobs. There are going to be potentially lots of jobs that are going. There's already discussion about, first tier jobs that typically graduates might come in and do, but increasingly now those jobs are being taken over by some form of AI. So this notion of, or these feelings, not even notions, these feelings of uncertainty and fear, and unpack that a little bit for us, Maggie. But how do people deal with this uncertainty and fear, which is such a human emotion, human reaction?
It is. And, and because AI happens to be technology, right? Then another thing that gets thrown in the mix is that intergenerational leadership thing going on, because, it's mostly assumed that perhaps some of our younger generations are more adept with technology than the older generations, because it wasn't as required in the workplace. So how do we address this fear and uncertainty? It comes with communication. It comes with the reassurances that is required. And quite frankly, it's not about the jobs going away as it is about us needing some new type of roles in the workplace. And I think when this understanding is there and communicated, it will then give opportunity for, leaders to be more, dare I say, open-hearted about these situations, because emotional intelligence is pretty much to do with the heart and, protecting staff, whereas, our EQ is always in the mind. So then what are these roles? We want to be talking about roles like the explainer role, so a while ago, before AI became a hit, a hype, back in 2019, when I was doing a summit talk to a tech summit in London, we talked about some of the roles that at that time MIT has done some research, global research with CEOs across the world. And even at that time, they were talking about some of the new roles that are expected in the workplace with a bigger onset of AI. So the explainer role is one of such roles, and it is about someone who has developed their emotional intelligence in such a way that they are able to sit across, organizations. Now, these days, when you're looking at job descriptions on LinkedIn and other places, you see the word cross-functional coming up very frequently. It's that because we have a big problem of silos within organizations, right? So what we're saying is an explainer role is someone who has developed their emotional intelligence in such a way that they are able to listen to what each unit within the organization are saying with regards to a particular strategy or a particular project or program that we're trying to implement within the organization. So they will be able to talk to the commercial team, sales, marketing, customer experience team. They'll be able to talk to say the tech team, the IT team, including the AI team. They'll be able to talk to the finance team, operations team, and from that information, they'll be able to synthesize that into a single line of communication that is understood by all. Right. And a role like that cannot be necessarily performed by AI yet. Is a human role. We can do part of it with AI, but it's definitely a human role. And these are some of the roles that we need. We need AI trainers. That's another role that was identified during that time. And again, these AI trainers, they need to be up on their emotional intelligence skills to be able to then train AI to be able to read in between the lines sometimes and makes perhaps some of those decisions that humans make, at least to a certain level before a human. So again, then there's a limited level of human interaction or intervention in decision making. But AI trainer roles are really important. And so that is, again, the type of roles, part of the roles that we need in the organization. In fact, we're seeing more of that now. Roles around ethics and policies around AI. Again, these are roles that we need in the workplace as well. So I think once the understanding is there, some of this fear can go away and people can breathe through it and then make a decision in terms of which of these other roles they're willing to upskill themselves in and then take on some of these roles within the organizations.
That's great. Thank you for that explanation. And I think that example at the end really did help to pull that together. What should leaders do to support their teams in some ways to kind of overcome this fear, overcome this uncertainty and anxiety? What should leaders be doing to help their teams overcome this?
Yeah, I think once they have been able to, assuage or dissuade, if that's the right word, their own fears, and they've become more aware of what this looks like, I think they will be in a much better position to then look at the teams. And so just like how they were feeling about their own job security, is natural for them to know that, the teams are also feeling the same thing. And so providing forums, whether these are, forums where we just discuss it or sometimes anonymous, where if there are team members who don't necessarily want to voice it out in the open, they are still given that platform, like in the form of surveys, anonymous forums and things like that, to voice any fears around AI adoption within the organization. Then based on that, we can aggregate that information to then create various, upskilling programs. Now, some can be in the form of training, some could be one-on-one support of some sort. And then also really looking at the skills that team members have and how they fit into some of the roles that are needed in the workplace as we evolve.
Right. And I know you've mentioned, the Mirror's adaptability framework when we've spoken earlier. Could you just outline this for us? What is this framework? How does it work? Go on.
Thank you. So this was a framework that was created. I created that with some members of my team at the very start of the pandemic, because we looked around and we're like, well, what is happening in the world now in terms of extreme change in our external environment is something that I felt specifically that the various change models that we had, like the ADCA model, the Kota model, I didn't think that they really did justice in addressing that kind of extreme change that we had at the start of the pandemic. And again, AI is a second level of extreme change that we've had in a short space of time. So the model is about really assessing change in an environment And then based on that change, looking at areas that we normally don't look at. So you look at the effect of the change on the organization as a whole, starting with the people, starting with things like their partners, external stakeholders, but also going deeper into the people within the organization. Things like, emotional and mental effect of this change that previously we wouldn't think of, but we know that it's really crucially important. So looking at those things, looking at things like, how this is affecting supply chain, looking at how this is affecting technologies. And again, AI is a big part of this. So once you've looked at those and, the model can be downloaded for free anytime. So you look at all of those and you form a 360 view of how this change, external change especially, but it's also internal in a way, is impacting the organization. Once you've seen that, then you are in a position to see where you want to take the organization. And from that perspective, you then look at another set as part of this circle of adaptability model, where you're looking at, is the business fit for purpose in this world, in this AI world, in this instance at the moment? And if so, are there tweaks to be done? Can we do it? Do we need external support to do that? And then you make decisions around that. And then in some instances, you also look at the other plan, which is the business as it is now not fit for purpose in terms of responding to a need in the marketplace? So that could mean that maybe a new sort of baby needs to be born into the world out of this existing business. And so from that perspective, maybe a new business need to be set up, a new program need to be set up alongside the existing business to respond directly to this change that is happening in the organization. And this model has been adopted by quite a number of clients, including my own, and some clients that I had the privilege of working with in various universities during that time as well. So that's what the adaptability model is all about. It's about our ability to assess extreme change in our environment, look at how we are adapting into that change, but making those ultimate decisions in terms of, is our business a fit for purpose? What needs to be tweaked to make it even more fit to gain that competitive advantage in its marketplace? And then in some instances, is there an opportunity that we're missing? And if so, how can we create something in a direct response to what the world needs right now? So that's what it's about.
Wow, sounds fascinating. I mean, it's a model that is clearly multi-layered, just in terms of some of the components that you've described and how it gets used. Maggie, we've talked about some big topics here. AI clearly is the focus of the conversation, but what you've introduced into that conversation is this notion of emotional intelligence, which I think is fascinating and not one that you hear being spoken about very often. And then you've brought it also into this context of leadership. So could I just ask you, because we've talked about AI, we've talked about EI, and we've talked about leadership. Could you help bring these three together? I mean, and just what's the interplay? How do these three things kind of interact with each other?
So AI is here to stay, as we know. It's not going away. What does this mean for leaders? It means that we are called to become more human, in order to match the levels at which our machines are developing. And I always say that if we as humans are able to develop machines that can learn and develop and take actions on their own, then we are more than capable to also develop ourselves even better. And we know that emotional intelligence, EQ, is something that is innate within all of us, and we can tap into that more and and, when needed, learn how to become more human by using our emotional intelligence even further along this journey. And the best in class leaders will be the best adopters of AI, and those who will ensure that their organizations are not just surviving but really thriving into the world of AI. And it comes back to adopting. It's about adopting, not just for survival but for thriving into the future. As an adage goes, normal is what we get used to, and we are in a world where, perhaps the normal that we know is becoming a different kind of normal. So we just need to leap into a new kind of normal.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining me on the AI Adoption podcast. You really have shone a light on issues which I think need much more investigation, much more research. And for me, introducing emotional intelligence into this topic of AI, which is fundamentally about, machines taking the decisions, doing the analysis, acting on those decisions, almost, premised on excluding people, bringing the conversation back to making people the center ground, and more importantly, not just the people, but making how they feel and their emotions the center ground, I think you've opened up a very important line of conversation that I think does need to be taken forward. So let me thank you again for joining me on the AI Adoption podcast, Maggie.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.